right, folks. Emancipation Day may have passed, but the Emancipation season is still in full swing. So while many of us celebrate with festivals and fanfare, Harris and I were talking this morning, how many of us truly pause to reflect on what emancipation really means. This morning, we've got a gentleman who is always talking about this and pushing what he thinks we need to know about pride and those who have gone before us. He's president of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, Stephen Golding. He's talking this morning about whether we are honoring our ancestors or simply just going through the motions or go and dance or go a party and then we forget. Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, ladies. Morning.
Being here with us.
Thanks for having me. Good
How
to
do
see
you generally feel at this time of year? Does it feel different?
I mean, August is a big month for us. You know, we call it the month of Messiah.
Do you?
But we don't like the coupling of emancipation and independence. You know, I know it's very easy for us to say emancipendence, but we have to understand that not only are they two distinct holidays, if we look at it that way, but they represent two distinct struggles, two distinct time periods. And when you break it down, there's a distinction in the people who comprise really what the meaning of these holidays are. Independence in Jamaica is for everybody, you know, out of many, one people. Mm-hmm. Emancipation speaks specifically to the struggles of the African descendants in Jamaica, who make up the majority of the population. Mm-hmm. And it's been easy in the past because of the colonial narrative that has been passed down for us to sort of scoop them up into one. But in the actual realization of emancipation, that was a 300-year struggle, three centuries.
I had never thought about, even when we spoke about this morning, I had never thought about it like that. Independence is for everybody. Emancipation is a particular struggle that affected Black people.
Exactly.
Never deconstructed it like that ever.
So what are some of the things, Stephen, that you believe are missing from the way we commemorate or remember emancipation?
I think what is missing is a sort of reverence in the remembrance of how emancipation happened. And so, being that we're in the century of reparation, as the Vice Chancellor of University calls it, we also have to remember that part of that is repairing the narrative, because you know, the way we've been educated and taught our history, let's not deny this, has been sort of catered and edited. We have a colonial curriculum that has come handed down to us, and it leaves out the majority of our story and replaces it with his story, right? As I said, you know, as I was quoted in the Gleaner as saying, emancipation is not a gift from the British. Every year we go to Seville, and one of the big features is to have a Jamaican dress as a British governor, put on a British accent, and read the Emancipation Proclamation, which speaks nothing about the war that Africans fought against slavery for 300 years. In fact, our history books don't even chronicle that war. It's only now in the 21st century various scholars are putting pieces together, right? We have from the 16th century a letter from the King of Congo to the King of Portugal telling them send no more slave traders to Africa. We have a petition before the Pope in the 17th century from an African questioning the Vatican about the legality of slavery. We have the Sons of Africa in the 18th century, Oluwado Equiano and others who brought the horror story of the Zong to the attention of the British Parliament, who formed themselves into a group and a society to lobby the British parliamentarians in the push for abolition. And they achieved it in 1807 with the abolition of the slave trade. Of course, slavery didn't end for another 3 decades, but their story is largely left out.
Wait, there, with them something there where you just mentioned.
They're there.
Which part is
Go
there?
to the British Museum, you'll find their stories.
I'm glad you mentioned the narrative, Steve, because even when you mention the Zong, there's a film about the Zang, but it gives us it gives a certain narrative about the Zang. When we look at, as you said, the history books, I used to tell people that growing up, me used to think it's only African Americans fight slavery because I was watching Roots.
Exactly.
And watching, so you would think that a lot of it came from, you'd believe that the Caribbean and Jamaica was a big part of it.
Absolutely right.
How do we
change that?
How do we change that? How do we...
There's material out there.
Yeah.
It's for our educational, I don't want to say legislators, but there's a part for the legislators to play. But those who sit on these councils that determine the curriculum to sort of wake up, you know what I mean, and smell the coffee, right? And insert these things into the curriculum without apology. Listen, we've had people in Jamaica, you know, we've had various groups over the decades talking about these things. The Rastafari for a long time have preached a liberation doctrine. But at one time we brand them as some sort of cult and these are these black people. And that is probably the saddest part of our story. That over the decades and the centuries we have been so brainwashed by his story and this subconscious white supremacy in our minds, even as black people, that when we are confronted with the truth of our own story, at first we refuse to believe it, you know, and we try to sideline it and put it in this little category. And then it takes another generation or two for us to catch up, right?
Irony of what you're saying about Rastafarianism is that Bob literally had to get legitimacy in those countries, you know,
before he was recognized here.
Before he was recognized.
And think about how deep his music was, right? Bob was reading Garvey. You know, he was reading the history of Ethiopia. He was infusing this into his music. He's the king of reggae because he created reggae as, what's the quote? Music is a mission. There was a mission in what he was doing, not just entertainment, but also education, right? And he's still not a national hero.
We're almost out of time, and I wanted to talk about Dirty Bookman and Sabina Park.
Yes, those characters are part of the narrative that's missing. And there are others like Cuba Cornwallis, right? A black woman who gained her own freedom in the 18th century, who was once owned by William Cornwallis, who was the brother of Charles Cornwallis, who led the British against the American Revolutionary Forces. And here was a woman who freed herself, helped to save the life of Horatio Nelson and the life of King William IV, a black woman in Port Royal. There was one little sign for her before they started renovating or redoing Port Royal, and it has come down. And I've, you know, spoken with the people who are organizing to make sure that her story is not forgotten going forward. But again, Delia, those are just examples. And I've called a couple other names earlier in this interview that show the need for us to reclaim our narrative, to repair the narrative, and to share these things with our children. You know, incidentally, I have a nursery rhyme book out now called the Daddy Marcus Nursery Rhymes. Nice. That's a play on the Mother Goose nursery rhymes, which takes the old British nursery rhymes, which were written from as far back as the 1600s, that we are still teaching our children today.
London Bridge still falling down.
We've taken them, we've changed the lyrics to reflect the story of Jamaicans, to reflect our stories coming from Africa. That's the kind of thing we need to be having our children memorize at that critical part of the early childhood educational system, because you will remember those British nursery rhymes till the day you die, you know. You might all forget your grandchildren's name or even your children's name, so help you God.
They've been reinforced.
But you will remember those
In
nursery
my grandmother's time, it was longer poems. King Bruce of Scotland.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So Stephen, let me ask you about the events, because you mentioned one. We have a series in our Independence Village and in the lead up to Independence. Do we need to have more? Is independence, I think, can ever overshadow?
Listen, emancipation needs to be taken to a whole different level, right? It is not a drink chocolate and dance and clap the British governor for giving us freedom. It is a time of reflection. It is a time of reverence. In fact, a decade or so ago, the United Nations declared March 25th as the International Day for Remembrance for the victims of the transatlantic slave trade. Not the victims of slavery, you know, because there's another day for that. That's because slavery is not just particular to black people, but chattel slavery and the commercialization of chattel slavery is our particular history. March 25th, did you know that?
No.
How many schools recognize that here? And not just even in Jamaica, throughout the region, because we live with the Caribbean region, is a region that has a common history when we talk about the trafficking and enslavement of Africans, right? Do we bring the flag down on that day? Do the leaders of CARICOM come together like we see every November? US, Britain, France, everybody sticks a poppy in their jacket to recognize the blood of the fields of Flanders and the end of the Jewish Holocaust? Well, the Jewish Holocaust was only a decade. The African Holocaust that we call the Maafa or the Maangamizi in Swahili was 300 years. And we don't have one day as leaders to pause and reflect and honor the sacrifices of our ancestors who gave their life like Sabina Park, right? So that we could be free? No, it's about drinking chocolate and singing and dancing. It should not be. And I'm calling on the government, as I have in the past, to give some recognition to that day, to couple it also with emancipation, to release emancipation from this connection with independence. I'm not troubling independence, but emancipation represents
it's a sacred day.
a different sort of struggle that for years, imagine that for many years we even removed Emancipation Day from being celebrated.
We did.
So, you know, that is a testimony to the fact that those who legislated that didn't see that as a part of their history. And I wonder why, right? The PSOJ had a faux pas last year or the year before talking about coupling them. Well, look at the faces of some of the people in the PSOJ. This is not their history either. This is the majority of the population's history, and we have to claim it, and we have to celebrate it in a way that would make our ancestors proud. This is the African way.
All right, we got to go. Thank you so much, Stephen. I was telling someone that and Stephen would know, Costa Rica and other countries where there are second-generation Jamaicans, they still recognize Fossa August, and in a big way. President of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, Stephen Golding. We meet Jamaica's 2025 Festival Queen after the break.